You've seen the trenches, you've heard the stories of soldiers, but behind the front lines of the First World War, another kind of suffering was quietly unfolding, one carried on the backs of animals. During the First World War, over 8 million horses served on all sides of the conflict, carrying soldiers, holding artillery, and transporting supplies. The average lifespan of an artillery horse in action was 10 days. In 1915, 75,000 sick horses had to be treated on the Western Front. In 1917, the figure was 1,000 animals. About every third horse used by the Germans needed treatment during the course of the war. A large proportion of the horses were killed when they could no longer work. Of the approximately 7,200 veterinarians in Germany, more than 5,300 veterinarians are said to have worked for the war service, treating between 1.25 and almost 1.4 million horses. But what happened when these animals were injured? In this historical footage, we explore a German horse hospital in occupied France, a vital but often overlooked part of the military infrastructure. Through this silent film, we'll uncover how veterinary medicine adapted to the brutal demands of modern warfare. Horses in the First World War were so very important because without horses, the First World War would certainly have been different. By that I mean that this industrial mass war, which used up vast quantities of shells, would not have been possible without transport horses. They wouldn't have been able to shoot so much because they wouldn't have been able to transport the ammunition to the front. It was really important to get sick horses healthy again so they could carry on their duty. Basically, soldiers were replaceable, but horses not so much. As the British soldier Bert Stokes wrote, the Germans used around 1.5 million horses during the war on the Western Front. On the Western Front, they had around 700,000, in 1918 even 900,000, while on the Eastern Front there were 400,000 to find. A veterinary officer corps had only been created in the German army a few years before the outbreak of the First World War, but it was headed by a cavalry officer rather than a veterinary officer. Vets were mainly deployed as troop vets in the mounted formations. Higher ranks were significantly underrepresented compared to other officer careers. Over the course of the war, a total of more than 5,300 vets were deployed, which was around 75% of all vets in the German Reich. Of these, 241 veterinarians died, were killed, or succumbed to their war wounds. At the beginning of the war, the German army, especially the Prussian army, was not prepared for the large number of wounded and diseased horses. A horse hospital organization was completely lacking and was only established in the course of the war. The improvisation skills of the veterinary officers were required. It starts with a shot that shows where it has been filmed. It is the Saxonian Horse Hospital 234, behind the lines. On the right a sign says stop, scabies horses or horses with suspect scabies. Entry is strictly forbidden. This tablet says slightly ill horses on the way to the hospital, which is pretty much what we see. In the back we have a demolished or even destroyed church. The horses are accompanied by a soldier on foot. Each soldier leads 2 horses, while most of the soldiers are wearing a working dress, meaning most of them are having their drillich jacket on, some even their drillich pants. Some more, their woolen pants. At the beginning of the war, the care system for war vets in Germany was astonishingly poorly organized and had to be improvised. There was a lack of professional care for the horses. Trained riders led along grooms were rare. Added to this was the unbelievable crudeness of the people, as one major general described it. Training courses to combat the shortcomings were established later on. One vet was responsible for 615 horses. In 1915, a system of field, stage, and home horse hospitals was established. Veterinary care was professionalized for the first time. Seriously ill horses are brought to the military hospital, the former French cavalry barracks, by horse-drawn transport vehicles. The footage goes on where it stopped before, at the gate, and indeed, here are horses in horse-drawn vehicles because they are very ill. There was a highly organized logistics systems, with sick or wounded animals being sent for treatment and recovered animals being returned to their areas of work. On the German side, there were a maximum of 550 horse depots and military hospitals. The mobile horse depots followed the front with sick animals. One of the horses brought to the gate is even seriously skinny, almost starved as it seems. Every single bone is visible. The sick horses are examined and referred to the appropriate departments. Now we have a wide shot of the courtyard. In it there are horses in rows next to each other, each held by the reins. Individual horses are led away by men in white coats, who could be doctors or assistants, panned across the courtyard. As for the dresses, mostly drillich jackets and woolen pants. Some wear a field tunic or drillich pants. The most common ailments were malnutrition, overexertion, and injuries from weapons, gas or barbed wire. On the Eastern Front, gunshot wounds predominated. On the Eastern Front, mange and exhaustion. Horses also suffered from gas attacks, albeit less than humans. Protective goggles, gaiters, and gas masks were available for horses. Contaminated horse feed damaged internal organs. The military provided for injured military horses to be restored to war fitness. Translation: woe betide anyone who grooms badly here. Some horses are shown on the outside with some soldiers, who could be blacksmiths or farriers. Then the camera pans to the saying, which is a play of words, to the honi soit qui mal y pense, which means shame on anyone who thinks evil of it, which is the motto of the Order of the Garter, the highest order of chivalry in the UK. The next one says always forward. Now, there are a lot of horses on the outside, standing side by side, which are being groomed by some of the soldiers. 2 vets and 250 soldiers were responsible for 1,000 horses. Those horses, whose recovery would take longer than 4 weeks, were treated in the stationary horse hospitals. Here, 2 vets and 70 soldiers were responsible for 150 animals. In the German Reich, excluding Saxony and Bavaria, there were around 50 of these military hospitals. In addition, there were horse convalescent homes to, at least, make weakened animals fit for farming again. If horses could no longer be used for military or civilian purposes, many were eaten. A vet in a white dress above his uniform is coming into the stables where horses are groomed. The grooming soldiers do right away stand to attention while the vet enters the stables, but quickly the soldiers stand at ease and go back to grooming. They are still wearing working or cleaning dresses. This shot shows a vet who might come out of the stables, and soldiers who hold horses on a rope while standing to attention but rather quickly stand at ease. Then some assistants are coming with a table and some tools for the vet. Blood sample taken to check for suspected glanders. We get a close-up of the vet, how he inserts a needle with a test tube or vial into a vein of the horse to draw blood. Glanders was very dangerous. In general, the affected animals had to be killed immediately. Among the German troops, 310,000 horses contracted glanders, more on the Eastern Front than on the Western Front. The authorities tried to get the disease under control through systematic mass testing. It was important that soldiers recognized the symptoms at an early stage. Education, prevention, and veterinary work were effective. Treatment of a horse with an eye condition. A vet drops some of the tincture into the horse's eye and then rubs it in. Dental treatment, filing down a damaged tooth. A vet goes with his arm into the horse's mouth to feel and see where the bad tooth is. The soldier on the side just holds the horse, so the vet is able to do it. We can see on the soldier's field cap actually the cockade of Saxony, meaning white with a green circle. It looks like he is wearing a drillich tunic in field grey. Then an assistant comes into the frame. A large vice construction is tied around the horse's mouth. A vet or assistant rather roughly inserts an oversized file into the mouth. The horse initially flees a few steps backwards, although it is held by 2 helpers. On the second attempt, intensive filing is then carried out. In total, the treatment appears extremely rough. Binding a foal. The foal is held by 2 men, while a vet and maybe an assistant put something on the foal's legs and afterwards bind it. Then it is free to go. It seems like that the foal is going right to its mother. Having healthy foals was very important too, so the future stock of horses would not be endangered but more likely saved. Hoof cancer surgery. A. Anesthetize. B. Laying the horse on the ground. 2 vets or 1 vet and 1 assistant are on the side of the horse. It seems as if the vet carefully inserts the syringe with the anesthetic into a vein of the horse's neck in order to administer it to the horse gently. After the close-up, we are now in a wide shot. This one shows how another vet holds a flask with the anesthetic, while the soldiers observe it and wait until it kicks in, so they are able to prepare the laying down. Helpers prepare the laying down of the horse with ropes and chains around the hooves. The horse gets pushed over into a pile of straw. Afterwards, it gets rolled over. The next footage shows horses in front of a stable. The shield above says, "Scabies stable, altmarkt." Infectious diseases such as mange and glanders were a danger to entire military units. They were favored by the weakened constitution of the animals, the cramped housing, and the mixing of the herds, including by captured horses. Mange affected the most animals, with over 1.3 million cases over the duration of the war. Mengi foal is shown. Exactly what has been described is happening here. A foal with mengi or scabies is shown. It seems like that the foal is in a pretty bad condition. Very interesting is the clipper that is driven by hand through a wheel. The fur as well as the mane is getting shown. One soldier is holding it on a rope and is confining the foal. Placing a mange horse in the sweating oven, temperature 110 degrees Celsius. A horse is guided backwards into a room made of bricks as it seems. There are 3 soldiers with it, 2 in a working dress, 1 in uniform, who might be an NCO. The wooden doors get closed. In the door there are little openings so the horse could put its head through the outside. The soldiers bring a wooden drinking or food container. The average lifespan of an artillery horse in action was 10 days. In 1915, there were already so many horses missing that the highest authorities ordered that teams of 6 horses should only be pulled by 4, and those of 4 by only 2. In October 1916, it started that the first cavalry units had to continue fighting unmounted. The winter of 1917-18 brought considerable losses of horses. After the peace treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, the German army was able to transfer horses from the Eastern Front to France. Nevertheless, this supply of horses was only a drop in the ocean. In the Battle of Moray Wood, or in French Bataille du Bois de Moray, at the end of March 1918, 800 horses died in less than an hour. This footage shows soldiers how they bring the horses onto a pasture. On it, they are allowed to be horses, and they should recover so that they could be put back into service again. Now, farriers at work are shown. While the loss of horses in 1915 was still 9.5%, the animals were so weakened in 1918 that the figure rose to almost 25%. In the theaters of war in Africa, the losses of animals were presumably higher. This was partly due to the climate and partly due to a lack of food. Separate units on the fronts utilized the dead animals to produce leather, fat, glue, and animal meal from the skin and bones. The meat, if safe, was eaten. Quote, "The severe shortage of raw materials urgently requires all-round cooperation in the recovery of fallen animals and animal waste," end quote, as it is said on a leaflet on animal carcass utilization. Here, in the last scene, there is a sentence on the wall, which means, translated, "You and I are also creatures. Man and horse suffer the same pain. His blood also flows for your hearth." We have seen what it actually looked like in the German World War I horse hospital. Of course, some things might have been shown in a better light in that footage, or maybe better documentation, than they actually were, but it is still an astonishing insight. There were a lot of details as well as tools that were shown. Additionally, how it looked like in such a facility and roughly how it was structured. Interesting and logical is that barracks of the cavalry of the enemy in the occupied territory were used, so there was enough space for the horses as well as for the staff. Not much needed to be added additionally, since everything needed was already there. By the end of the First World War, more than 8 million horses and mules had served, and millions never returned. While the human toll dominates the historical record, the logistical and emotional role of animals was immense. Facilities like this German horse hospital in France were essential. They reveal a lesser-known side of wartime operations, where veterinary science evolved rapidly to meet the demands of industrial-scale conflict. This footage, rare and silent, speaks volume. It reminds us that the war's impact reached far beyond the trenches, shaping lives, practices, and professions in ways we are still uncovering today. In every frame, a story and a reminder of those who served without ever holding a weapon. At some point, we are going to dig deeper into the history of the horses during World War I, since there are still so many facets that can be covered, especially because our point of focus is mostly the cavalry. So, this is it for today. Thank you for watching, have a good one, and see you next time. Bye!